Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is James, and today I'm going to be ranking all 12 of the Christopher Nolan movies. With Oppenheimer releasing this weekend, I thought it'd be the perfect time to rank his films, simply because we don't know when the next film will come out. Christopher Nolan is a very interesting director. He has been in the industry for around 30 years now, and he's one of those directors that can get anything he wants. If he wants you to give him $100 million budget for a biopic, he'll get it. And so he's had a very interesting career. He's done superhero movies, he's done mysteries, he's done action movies, he's done sci-fi, he's done war movies. His career is all over the place when it comes to genres. And so this is going to be a very interesting ranking to do. But before I give you my ranking, please let me know down below in the comments, what's your ranking of the Christopher Nolan movies? This is obviously not going to be the right list. It's just my list. There's going to be a lot of division in here because he's got just a great filmography. Please tell me kindly. But with that said, let's get on to the ranking. At number 12 is Following. Now, this was Christopher Nolan's first movie. It was made on a incredibly micro budget, and that's putting it kindly. This film was made for around $6,000, and Christopher Nolan made it with his friends over weekends and days that they had off work. And to start off with the positives, there's some novelty to seeing where this guy started off and where kind of his career began, and how even from the beginning he had all those traits that he has nowadays with the non-linear storytelling and how the story plays out. But to me, this is the one that I never really revisit. This is one, and I also really like the story of this guy who his kind of like his tick is following people and he follows the wrong person. I like that. But it just doesn't really stand out to me. It's a movie that, because it's so low budget, it doesn't really have the resources or opportunity to just show off anything. And that's not anyone's fault. You know, they were working with what they had. What they had was, they did a good enough job. But this is a movie that I don't really enjoy. It's not very long. It kind of is just a movie where it's in and then it's out. It starts and then it ends. So it's a movie that it's fine. It's easily the worst movie on this list. It's like a 2.5 star. I'd say everyone who's a Nolan fan should watch it just to see where he came from, but it's not necessary for his career. Now, from 11 on up, all these movies I at least enjoy. They're all at least a 3.75. Nick Christopher Nolan has the most, or one of the most consistent careers ever when it comes to a director. So at number 11 is Memento. This is a movie that is beloved by so many people. And to be honest with you, this movie is fantastic the first time I watched it. It's got a really cool concept of telling a story backwards, where every 5 minutes you have to reframe how everything that you had just seen. It's very interesting. And I think that it's got a very well-written script. Christopher Nolan was nominated for an Academy Award for this script. It's very well done on all those remarks. I think for the most part, the acting is really well done. And then, of course, everything that is talked about in this film is the twist. I'm not going to spoil it, but I think the twist here is very good. It's a fantastic twist overall. And it, once again, like Following, shows how Christopher Nolan, from his early days, had all the traits that he has today. But my main problem with this film is that it is not very rewatchable. It still has some low budget energy to it, not anywhere near as much as Following, but it has a little bit of that. And I think the rewatch value and the shock value of that twist doesn't work as well on rewatch. Where the first time it shocked me, but now it's just, I just find it hard to get through it. From there, I don't think that the main character is very interesting. That's just a me thing. I've never found Guy Pearce, I think his name is, to be a very good actor. I think he's fine in this movie. I think he's does a good job with what he's given, but he doesn't bring too much depth, in my opinion. But this is still a very good movie. This is still like a 3.75. I'd be hovering around to buy it. So it comes in at number 11. Kicking off the top 10 is Insomnia. And once again, this is a 3.75 or up. This is a movie that I enjoy and I have a lot of, and that I'm not necessarily have a lot of fun with, but I do like. This movie stars Al Pacino and Hilary Swank and Robin Williams, and all three of those actors give fantastic performances in this movie. Robin Williams, God bless his soul, rest in peace, gives a performance in this that you don't really get to see from him very often. And to me, he should have been nominated for an Academy Award for this. Al Pacino is almost as good. He's great playing this cop that has insomnia, where he's hunting down this killer, but he accidentally killed his partner, and he doesn't want anyone to know that. So, but Robin Williams is the only person that knows. So he's playing this cat and mouse game where if he catches Robin Williams lets his secret out, but he's a killer that needs to be caught. And throughout this film, it does a really good job of making you question Al Pacino's character of, did he intentionally kill his partner or was it an accident? And does Robin Williams know if it was an accident or not? And so it does a really good job of building tension throughout the film. But to me, unlike Memento, this is a movie that, and much like Following, I don't really remember much about it. I watched it, I think once or twice. I enjoyed it, I liked it, but it didn't really stay with me. So it's a film that I enjoy, I respect. It kind of got Christopher Nolan the job for Batman, which is always good. But it's also a movie that I don't rewatch really ever. So it's once again, 3.75 film out of 5 film. Go out and buy it or stream it. So it comes here at number 10. And there's a bit of a jump from number 10 to number 9. We go from about a 3.75 to a 4.25. From here on up, I really like all of these movies. Some of them they go from great to fantastic to some of my favorite movies of all time. And it just so happens that at number 9 is Interstellar. Now, Interstellar is a movie that I often call the most emotional Christopher Nolan film. If you think Christopher Nolan is an unemotional director, watch Interstellar. Because that scene, it's so emotional. Matthew McConaughey, people forget that he's an Academy Award-winning actor, and he does just as well in certain scenes in this movie. That scene when he's driving off to leave Earth to go save it, knowing that he may never see his daughter again, and he's just crying, that breaks me every time I see it. This is often credited as Christopher Nolan's 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it's very clear that he was influenced by that film and films like that. There's an AI, there's betrayals, there's kind of a mystery going on, they're in space, and it's very well done. The visual effects here are absolutely fantastic, especially the water planet stuff, where it's like every second of that scene took a day to film or something. I mean, that's insane. I don't know if I'm exactly correct on that. I might have been bullshitted, but I've heard that before, and that's insane. All of everything else, I think that this film is fantastic. I think that I'm one of the few people that actually think Matt Damon's character is an interesting kind of contrast to Matthew McConaughey's character, and how Matthew McConaughey's character could have gone down a wrong path. This is a film that introduces us to Timothée Chalamet, which people forgot. And I actually really enjoy the kind of, in the back half of the film, on one side of the story, you've got people on Earth, and on the other, you've got Matthew McConaughey. And it's unknowingly, he doesn't realize that he's probably only got a little bit of time before everyone dies. And so it's this ticking time bomb that really works, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat for the entire film. Where this movie doesn't really work for me is, number one, I don't think that the twist at the end fully comes through entirely. I think that the element of they were always watching them, and it was like kind of like a space-time continuum, because they constantly talk about it's them, like they're talking about it's themselves. I think that is interesting, but there's just something about the other elements of the twist that I just have never clicked with me. And then all the other astronaut characters I think are really dull. Like, I don't think Anne Hathaway is very interesting. She's an actress where she either really works or she really does not. And in this film, she's not bad, she just doesn't work. And so it's a great movie. It's got some great visual effects, some great performances, but it's also a movie that has flaws. So it comes here at number 9. At number 8 is Tenet. Now, this is a movie that was released in 2020, in late 2020, kind of in the middle of the pandemic era. And this was the first movie that I saw back in the theater. I went to a theater, and because of that, I'm always going to have a soft spot for this film. This will always be one of my favorite theater experiences because I hadn't been to the theater in 6-7 months, and seeing a Christopher Nolan movie in the theater with fantastic sound, with great visuals, a great screen, was so much fun. And I loved it the first time I saw it. The first time I saw it, I was saying it's top 3 Nolan easily. As time has gone on, I've tempered my expectations. I don't think that necessarily. I think that this is a very good movie. This is on the same level as Tenet. Great movie, but it has flaws. Starting off with positives, I think that the entire idea of time, like certain objects and certain places that reverse time, is very interesting. I think that all of the action is fantastic, especially the airport fight scene and the highway chase where things are going backwards and they're driving backwards. I mean, that's just fantastic. I think most of the performances are great, and it's got a very cool spy element to it where you've got characters running around and like spies, and it feels like a mix between Mission Impossible and like a bit of James Bond, where this feels like this is maybe Nolan's most ambitious movie, period. I mean, it's very ambitious film, and it's got a bunch of twists in the third act that I actually think really, really work. Nolan will always shoot for the stars, and sometimes he doesn't get there, but in this film, I actually think it really works. Where the negatives land is a lot of the stuff you can't hear. There's something with the sound mixing where the things that people were saying and the sound just didn't match up, so you couldn't hear what you're saying, so it sounded like this. And then in the background you'd hear wah, 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 like all that stuff, and like these big sound effects, and so you can hear what they're saying, and so you could not pay attention for a second and you get lost. And that's the other flaw with this film, is that to be honest with you, if you don't pay attention and you're not on the screen for that 2.5 hours, you're gonna get lost at some point, and it can get very confusing. And it can feel long. Some of his movies don't. Most of his movies are pretty long, and a lot of them don't feel very long. But Tenet is a 2.5 hour movie that feels like it's about 3 hours, or it feels like it's 2.5 hours. And so those are my main flaws, but apart from that, I love it. I think it's a great movie. So it comes here at number 8. At number 7 is The Dark Knight Rises. Now, this is very clearly the weakest of the Dark Knight trilogy, but it's still a fantastic film. This movie was the conclusion of the Dark Knight trilogy. At the time, this film had sky-high expectations. It was coming off the back of not one, but 2 Christopher Nolan masterpieces in Inception and The Dark Knight, which were box office behemoths. The Dark Knight, to this day, is still credited as maybe the greatest comic book movie of all time. And so the expectations for this movie were through the roof. And to be honest with you, I think that there are parts of this movie that are just as good as The Dark Knight. I think that all of the action is fantastic. It's got, while it's still only set in Gotham, the action is bombastic, it's massive, there's explosions, there's car chases, there's fist fights, there's entire armies attacking each other. Ambition is the word when it comes to Dark Knight Rises. And that I love that element of it. I also love Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I don't like how they use her with Bruce Wayne, but I love her in the role. I think Tom Hardy as Bane is absolutely killer. He's so good in that role. And he just does such an interesting job where you always know that he's not just this big hulking guy, but he's so much smarter than that. And he's menacing where he literally blows up an entire football stadium. I mean, that scene in of itself is very interesting. I think that all of like his plan at the start is interesting and like makes sense. And it's like trying to figure out what's going on is great. I love seeing kind of a broken Batman coming back to the light. To me, that's fantastic stuff. And I love the conclusion of this film of him flying off, but faking his own death and kind of getting to live the life that he always wanted, which is a quieter life. And Gotham doesn't need him anymore. And I overall think that this is a fantastic conclusion to the trilogy. But to be honest with you, I do think that the third act is the problem. Once Bruce Wayne breaks his back and once Gotham gets shut down, it goes off a bit where it's revealed that they're gonna essentially wait 6 months to blow up the city instead of blowing it up now for some reason that doesn't make sense to me. And then the Talia al Ghul twist just is so obvious, and it's got one of the worst death scenes ever. And so there's a lot of plot holes in the last, 40 minutes of the movie. And so that's what really drags it down from being like 2 or 3 spots higher, because I think there are some parts that are so great, but it has those flaws. So it's still a fantastic film, still love it, but it comes here at number 7. At number 6, the halfway through this list, is Inception. Now, this is a movie that is often credited as one of his best movies, and to be honest with you, I've never understood that. When I first saw this, I did not like it. I didn't. I thought it was way too long. I thought that it was... A lot of the stuff just didn't match up. I thought that the twist was way too ambiguous when it felt like you should have just answered it. To be honest with you, I didn't even like Leonardo DiCaprio's performance. As time has gone on, I've grown to love this movie. This was like a 4.5 and up from here on out. I think that this movie is genuinely fantastic on so many different levels. I think that the action itself is incredible. I mean, the car chases, the train sequence, just everything in and of itself is great. Shootouts are great. And once again, this is another film that I think has some emotion where Leonardo DiCaprio, he's not sure, he can't let go of Mal yet, his dead wife. He can't let go of her yet. And I think that's really interesting. I also think it's interesting that this backlash of he doesn't want to tell people, but his assistant knows stuff, and so you once you get into the dream and you realize if they die, they die. It just raises the stakes to a whole new level. I mean, from then on, this movie really kicks off. The first, until then, I'm not fully on board. But once it gets there, it's this movie kicks off with a bang. And it's great from then on out. I still think this movie is too long. I still think that it could be tightened by about 10 minutes. There are certain scenes that do go on about a minute or so or 30 seconds too long. And that's really unfortunate. And so to me, this is a film that over time, I've grown to love it. But I don't think that this will ever be a movie that I genuinely just adore like so many other people do. So it's great. I'm not complaining too much about it, but it's not necessarily for me. So it comes in here at number 6. At number 5 is Batman Begins. And this movie to me is a great origin story, and it's one of the best origin stories we've ever seen in a comic book movie. To me, this is the ultimate and definitive Batman origin story. This film is fantastic. Just starting off with positives, I love the villain of Ra's al Ghul, where he's not really, at the start, he doesn't seem like a villain, but then as you go through film, you realize, no, he's got some sinister plans. But what makes him interesting is that he believes in the cause, and so they're not romanticizing him. He still needs to be stopped, but he believes in what he's trying to do, and that's make Gotham better. And so he's kind of an alternate to Bruce Wayne, where Bruce Wayne is trying to make Gotham better, but in his own way, in a better way, in a cleaner way, where Ra's al Ghul thinks, you can't do that. You have to do the dirty work. You have to hurt people to rebirth this city. And I think that's really interesting. I think his plot with the Scarecrow comes through very well, and I think it works very well. I think that the actual just origin of Batman, of him training and doing all this other stuff, is very well done. And Christian Bale plays this role so fantastically. I think Katie Holmes is actually really good in the role of the love interest. I don't get the hate that she gets. They have good chemistry in my mind. And this is where you just, like, everything apart from, like, the hand-to-hand combat is really well done. Like, all the car chases and shootouts are really well done. And to me, this is the definitive Batman origin story. There are a couple flaws. Number one, I do think that the action isn't very good, where it's just very choppy shots. It doesn't really look all that great. And then I do think that when Scarecrow is captured and they kind of get rid of that problem, it struggles a bit in the middle to find a new villain. And I think if they just stuck with Ra's al Ghul all the way through, or Scarecrow all the way through, instead of having to do that transition, this movie could move up a spot or two. But overall, this is still a fantastic movie, and it is the traditional Batman story. So it comes in here at number 5. At number 4 is The Prestige. And for a while, this was my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. And from here on up, these are all 5-star movies. I think that all these movies are damn near perfect films. I love them all. And The Prestige is one where this was a movie that was done in between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. And this was kind of his last movie that wasn't entirely just like big budget studio stuff. Where I'm not saying that all of his other movies are, but after kind of The Dark Knight, he really only worked with major studios with massive budgets. Where you look at The Prestige, and it doesn't have a huge budget compared to his other movies. I mean, it's well budgeted, it's well spent, but compared to things like Dark Knight Rises, Tenet, Inception, Oppenheimer, and like a few others, it doesn't really come close. And I actually think that works for it. This is a film that is much smaller scale, and it's about to me at least, it's about two friends at odds with each other who have the chemistry and have the ability to become great minds and work together, but because they're both too ambitious, that ends up tearing them apart. And to me, that's very interesting, where from the beginning, Hugh Jackman's character is always interested and always curious about how Christian Bale does his acts. And then when he finally figures it out, the tables are reversed, or what we think. There's also, and how I love looking at how at the beginning we think that Hugh Jackman's character is going after Christian Bale simply because of his wife being killed, and that he's trying to ruin his life because he thinks he killed his wife. But there's a lot of more, but as you go on, you start to think and realize that maybe Christian Bale is the real protagonist of this movie, and we need Hugh Jackman to be stopped, where
you look at Hugh Jackman, where Hugh Jackman's character, when you get to that twist of what Hugh Jackman's act is, of him cloning himself, you realize that after every act he kills this clone, it's just takes this whole other turn where you realize that while Christian Bale isn't the cleanest of people, Hugh Jackman needs to be stopped. And the twist where Christian Bale, and this is a spoiler, so fast forward about 30 seconds, where Christian Bale, it's revealed that Christian Bale has had a clone all this time, and he's been living a double life all this time, is a very interesting twist. I've never been just blown away by it, simply because I always saw under his friend's hat, it looked like Christian Bale, and I was like, oh, that's just a weird director choice to cast him in two different roles, but that's okay, I guess. And so, but it works very well. And so this movie is genuinely perfect to me. There's really nothing I can say to knock against it, except for maybe Scarlett Johansson isn't as well developed as all the other characters. But to me, I love this movie, and it's a perfect film. So it comes in at number 4. Kicking off the top 3 is the new kid on the block, Oppenheimer. Now, I put out a short review about this film on the Friday that it came out, and in short, I love this movie. This is my second favorite movie of the year so far. And to me, this film, on an objective level, pure objectively, pacing, score, cinematography, visuals, sound, acting, all that stuff, direction, this is without a doubt Christopher Nolan's masterpiece. On an objective level, this is without a doubt Christopher Nolan's best movie he's ever made. I mean, everything about this movie is flawless, apart from a couple things. And so, this movie is so good at building tension. And to the point where there's almost no action in the entire film, in the entire movie, but it's just tension for 3 hours, and it's just like, oh my god, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And this is a film where it's building up to a moment in time that you never get to see. It's building up to the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombings, but you never get to see them. And you just get to see it from Oppenheimer and everyone at Los Alamos from their perspectives. And I think that is so well done. From there, all of the performances are outstanding. Cillian Murphy deserves that Best Actor win. I don't care. He's the best performance of the year, bar none. Nothing has come close to him. Robert Downey Jr. once again just proves that he's more than Iron Man. That he's going to get nominated for Best Supporting Actor in this, where he plays a character that's nothing, absolutely nothing like Tony Stark. Emily Blunt is fantastic, and she has a really great monologue moment, Oscar moment in the third act. Matt Damon is great. The entire cast is great. This is a film where you'll see random famous people showing up for about 3 minutes, and you're like, oh, it's that guy. Oh, it's that guy. Oh, it's that guy. Like Gary Oldman playing Truman, I never thought I'd see that. This movie, to me, on an experience level, was perfect. The film... And it has something to say. This is a very important film where, as you get towards the time that the Trinity test is about to be completed, it uses your knowledge against you, where you want to see our characters succeed because we like them, and we know what happens if they don't, where Hitler could take over, the war could continue, more lives could be lost. But as it happens, and as that bomb goes off, you want to have something about it wants you to have that kind of element of just victory, of we did it. But at the same time, you look at it and it's like, and just kind of like horrified of like, oh my God, what have we done? Of what have we created? And what have we doomed ourselves to? And to me, that is so well done. And looking at Oppenheimer's view from when he started to when he finished it, the test, to me is brilliantly done. And especially the final scene where he's, in spoiler alert, where Oppenheimer is talking to Albert Einstein, and Einstein walks away, and Oppenheimer says something along the lines of, you know, when you said if we launch that thing, it might cause a chain reaction that will destroy the world. It did. And then it montages through nuclear weapons firing across the world and lighting the atmosphere on fire. Hundreds of them. That scene is without a doubt one of the best scenes I've seen in years. This movie is truly fantastic. I didn't have any flaws with it. Maybe there's some characters that are underdeveloped, but to me, this gave me exactly what I wanted and beat all my expectations. So it comes here at number 3, and come time, this could become my favorite Nolan movie. My runner-up is Dunkirk. Now, this is a movie that seems to be very divisive, where a lot of people seem to love it like I do. A lot of people seem to not like it. A lot of people I've seen saying this is the worst Christopher Nolan film. And then there are a lot of people in the middle that are saying it's good, but it's not great. And I'm here to tell you this movie's fantastic. This movie is one of the best war movies ever made, where this film just, from the get-go, just your heart is pounding. And for that hour and 45 minutes, your eyes never leave the screen, because it just moves from one sequence to another of heart-pounding action. Of, you got the opening scene where they're walking through the town, they're getting sniped at. Then you got the scene where the plane's flying through and they're bombing the stuff. Then you've got the scene where they've got to carry the wounded guy to the ship across this plank. And if they fall, if they might die, he will probably drown. Then you've got the dog fight. Then you've got just everything about this movie is fantastic. And it really puts you in the perspective of what it's like to be in war, where everything is so unexpected and everything can kill you. Where something as simple as a traumatized soldier who just wants to leave who wants to leave and escape, and who has the opportunity to escape, can end up becoming a huge danger. And another thing I love about this movie is, that I don't see talked enough about, is the element of how good people can be. Where you have Mark Rylance's character, who it might as well be an regular old Joe, and he chooses to risk his life to go and save people and ride his boat out to Dunkirk and save soldiers, whether that be 1 or 1,000. And to me, that scene is like, just that whole journey of, this guy knows that it's possible he'll die, but he knows it's the right thing to do. And that's something where, like, it can show us that being a good person is hard, but it's the right thing to do sometimes. And so to me, this is one of the best war movies of all time. This is one of the best messages of the last decade. And to me, this is my second favorite Christopher Nolan movie. But my favorite Christopher Nolan movie is the old-timer, The Dark Knight. And as I mentioned before, this is often credited as the best comic book movie of all time. It's not to me. It's probably like a top 5, but this movie's fantastic. This movie's probably in my top 25 favorite movies of all time. I love this movie. This movie encapsulates what it means to be a comic book movie fan for me. And the reason why this movie is so great is because it transcends the comic book movie genre. Where and that's why they didn't call it a Batman movie. They called it The Dark Knight. Because if you didn't know anything about Batman, didn't know the title Batman, you didn't know Dark Knight, anything, you didn't know any of the lore, you would think this is like a ripoff of Heat, but done better. And that's because it essentially is. Christopher Nolan didn't turn to other comic book movies for inspiration for this film. He turned to crime thrillers like Heat. And that is why this is one of the greatest comic book movies of all time, because it transcends its own genre and becomes something completely different. That is why movies like Logan and The Batman and a couple others are some of my favorite comic movies of all time because they transcend their own genre and they're no longer just comic book movies. They're a different genre of film. The film, obviously, you can't escape this film without talking about the Joker, where Heath Ledger deserved that Oscar. I mean, that's just one of those things where it's like, holy shit, how did that? I mean, it's so unfortunate that he passed away, because that is just one of those actors where you could just tell that he was going to be an absolute star and he was going to be the next Daniel Day-Lewis or Anthony Hopkins. And it's so unfortunate what happened to him, and we continue to miss him to this day. And this film is truly fantastic. All the action, I think it's done way better in this film than Batman Begins. The Tumbler is absolutely so cool. And kind of just everything about the theme of fear, or not necessarily fear, but chaos, of how quickly someone that is just mentally fucked as the Joker can turn genuinely good people, truly good people like Harvey Dent, into murderers, into killers. And how even after the Joker is captured and after Harvey Dent is killed, Batman knows that he's not going to be able to escape this because he killed him, and he knows that people are going to want to look for someone to blame. And he takes it up on himself and says, I'm going to take the blame that I killed Harvey Dent. And to me, that works so well. And so this, after Oppenheimer, to me, isn't the best, and even after a few of his other movies, on an objective level, is not the greatest movie, Christopher Nolan film. But to me, it's always been my favorite, and it probably will always be my favorite. So it comes in at number 1. So that was my ranking of all 12 Christopher Nolan movies. I'm really curious what your guys' ranking are, because this is a list that will probably shift over time. So please let me know your ranking in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.